Uh, Hello and welcome back to I don't know if it's shitty or not, but it is an untitled anime podcast. I'm Kate. My pronouns are she, her.
I'm John. My pronouns are he, him.
This episode we're talking about movie
Is going to be the
6.
shortest episode, probably.
Yeah, because we didn't really want to group it with any of the others. This is movie 6, Boukyaku Rokuon. The thing about it is that it's kind of orphaned. It's like it's in between the two longest movies. So we would normally, because there's not a ton to talk about, and it's not an especially long movie anyway, we would normally group it with something, but I think
Yeah,
5 and 7 are each going to get their own. So, like, here
I
we
think
are.
overall it makes the most sense to group it with 1 through 4. But because we're watching
Yeah,
in
we're doing it in
release
order.
order, yeah. So
Yeah, I think this movie.
it really feels the most similar to those 4 movies, just in structure, in
Yeah,
style, in intent.
yeah. My first reaction at the end of the movie, and I mean, again, this is not my first time watching it, so this isn't my first reaction, but like, my reaction to this rewatch was, what's the point? It really, and I wanted to like this movie, not just to be a contrarian, but also because, like, there are some aspects of it that make me, you know, want to like it. I like the beginning. The music is on point. Um, really, like, sets the tone. And I always liked 1 through 4 more than 5 and 7. So I was like, oh, 6 kind of groups with them. Like, yeah, maybe I'll like it more. But yeah, it really, I don't know. I mean, maybe if it was with 1 through 4, it would be easier to forgive. Like, maybe it's a product of, like, the mindset that I have coming out of 5. But man, yeah, it just feels really pointless. And there's not a ton, like, being pointless is not necessarily bad in its own right, but this movie also doesn't have a whole lot of redeeming characteristics that make me, like, want to forgive that.
Yeah. I think like the most notable thing about the movie um, is like that it feels like the first time that Ufotable really goes all out with the particle effects.
Yeah, in the fight scene for sure. Yeah, it's it's a little overdone.
Like
I
other
can
than that,
agree.
I agree. Like other than that, there's kind of nothing that you could really say like, ooh, like,
Yeah, but even
like
that, I mean, that's not even
you want
necessarily a
something.
positive.
Well, no, that's what, but yeah, I'm not implying that it is. I'm saying like it's kind of the only thing that even really distinguishes it from from like 3, 1 and 3.
Ah,
Like,
yeah. Um,
because it's an episode, and it has like the tie-in with Asuka and Mikia, but it doesn't, other than that, like there's nothing
yeah.
really
The thing about
worthwhile.
1 and 3 is that they're episodes that at least have, like, something that they're trying to talk about. They don't have a ton to talk about, but, like, I don't know. They feel like they at least kind
Yeah,
of have a purpose. They also feel a lot more cinematic. Like, this movie, to me, it feels like an attempt at slice of life for a large portion of it. And
yeah,
I
a
would be
poor
okay with
attempt, I
that
would say.
if they went with it, but it's not really leaning into that. It's just kind of there in addition to, like, the
Yeah,
kind
it
of
sounds
very
like
somber
someone said,
tone
"Hey,
surrounding, like, her
like
memories and
we
flashbacks
could
and
do some
stuff.
slice of life stuff," and then they just like inserted like random little bits here and there without actually like
Yeah,
going for
well,
it.
it feels like potentially a product of the adaptation as well, because you have to imagine
That's
things.
fair.
Some things were cut, and also a big reason why it doesn't necessarily land is just because of the tone. Like, it doesn't like properly account for the presence of what is ultimately kind of slice of life stuff. Like, there's a lot of, like, what would be like cute interactions between Asuka and Shiki, but they end up being kind of irritating because it sets the way that the opening and the movie kind of carries itself to, on the whole, it just kind of doesn't imply that that's what you're looking for out of the movie. Like, it sets an expectation that there's something, like, a little bit more meaningful or heavy. Um,
Does it? I mean,
Kind
I
of.
remember the very first shot of the movie when it's like the ferry going down the hallway and then the camera,
Oh yeah. To be
tracks
fair,
the camera
actually,
zooms
yeah,
into pushes into Asuka and she like turns around and does like the thing and it's like, "Oh, it's gonna be that
yeah.
kind of movie."
Actually, to be fair, yeah, they do lean into it in that sense. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's not
Or
quite the
I think
case
it's
that
less
the
leaning into it
overall
as much as
tone.
they like they let you like they know what they're doing or they let you know what they're doing. I guess that they don't care.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like the opening sequence with like the stars and her memories and stuff.
Yeah,
Like it definitely like that part of it. I guess maybe it feels like two movies in that sense.
yeah.
And
It's the
they don't
opening scene.
mesh together very well.
Yeah, it's the opening scene with the stars, and then like it goes down a hallway, and she just like does a pose.
Yeah, and she gives like a stereotypical like self-introduction narration.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and like the thing is, I actually don't mind that at all. In fact, I kind of like it. I don't know, it just doesn't work. The movie kind of drags on. Like the humor is not
yeah,
quite there. Azaka is just weird and kind of annoying, to be honest. Like
yeah.
again, as much as I
I've
want to
always
like
thought.
her, she's just a strange character, man.
Yeah, I've always thought that like this movie like misses an opportunity to make Asuka an unreliable narrator, like
Hmm.
which would just make the episode more interesting and also like use Asuka better.
Yeah, that probably would help. I mean, maybe it already is. It See, the
Uh,
movie's bad because Asuka is bad at retelling the story.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's a
you're
meta
right. You're right.
commentary. Yeah.
Yeah, she's just like making up. She's like, I'm sure Shiki's just like, like charging repeatedly at the sensei at Goto word and just like failing and then getting frustrated and then charging repeatedly at it again until she loses or something.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure
probably
that's what
what's
she
happening.
that's something Shiki would do.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't push Ski down the stairs at the end. No, she left on her own out of consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it is her movie, right? And I think it fails in many ways just because she fails as a character to be interesting. Um, I said like I don't know how much this is tied to her character necessarily, but this movie is definitely winning the Nasu Bingo out of all the ones we've watched so far. It's very tropey. Like it has all the like reused character designs. It has like the Nasu tropes, like oh man, incest. That's Nasu for you. Like oh man, rich girls academy. Yep, that we're looking at a Nasuverse show. Oh boy, like I don't know.
Yeah.
The black haired teacher with glasses actually turns out to be a mage. Who would have thought? uh, yeah, and the thing is, like, even you know, tropes are not necessarily bad in and of themselves, right? Like, I don't really care that much that like there's so much stuff reused. It's like it's kind of fun to find it all, but I think in this particular case, it like doesn't really yeah, I guess it's very easy to pick on the fact that there are tropes because there's not much else to them. Like
Ex well,
they,
there's not
they
much
don't
else
they
to
don't
the
stand up
movie
on their own in a
either.
vacuum,
Yeah.
and an easy way to criticize them is to be like, oh, they're exactly like this other thing. Um,
Yeah, and like the movie just feels filled with tropes and not much else in terms of like, real thematic exploration. It's like, ooh, drugs,
yeah, that's the other thing.
heroin.
The thing is like the climax relies so much on two like things that Nasu kind of consistently handles poorly, at least in my experience. Um, and those are drugs and lesbianism. um, the drug thing, I think I don't even really need to elaborate, but he's like, oh man, the teacher, he was doing drugs, and the student found him, so he
And
drugged her,
so
and
he
then she got
just, yeah,
addicted. Like he just
yeah,
stuck her, and then she's like, oh, I need more. Ah, but I'm so
yeah,
ashamed. Ah, and it's like,
yeah.
all right. I
He
mean,
was, yeah,
I guess
he
it's
was,
like heroin or something, like, but
he was
all
like,
right.
oh no, this girl saw me doing drugs. I might lose my job. I better forcibly give her drugs. I better
Yeah, to make sure
forcibly
that she doesn't
inject
tell
heroin
anyone.
into her.
I mean, to be
Like,
fair, I can see that working on a student because it like, like it logically makes sense because it's like, all right, yeah, like this is an environment where it's like so heavily stigmatized that like she might just like consider that already like she might like blame herself already and be like, oh, I can't tell anyone about this,
well, I mean, yeah, that's what Nasa went for.
which is like,
And
yeah,
like I'm not
that's like
saying
the
I don't
logic of
believe it,
it.
but
Um,
yeah, it just
it is
feels
it is kind of silly that she like I guess apparently gets addicted. Like it's not clear whether like she gets addicted and then keeps going to him for his supplies, and then eventually they run out, and then she like goes into withdrawal, or she goes into withdrawal literally from one dose. I
Yeah,
can't tell
OG
what's
or
intended.
whoever or OG literally says like, "Oh, like she was ashamed of being a drug addict." And it was like,
Yeah,
"Well, like did she know she was addicted just from one time?" And so like then she just couldn't take it, which
yeah.
is,
There's a little
it's
bit
not
missing there. I mean,
unbelievable or
the
anything, but
charitable interpretation is that she got addicted and then went back to him for more multiple times, and they had like an ongoing thing, and then at some point it broke
yeah,
down, and then yeah.
regardless it's ridiculously not even underexplored. It's just like underthought almost. It's just
Yeah,
like,
well,
yeah,
it's
here you
just
go.
and yeah, like drugs as a plot
Like
point in the Natsuverse, it always just I
and
don't know,
it's also a
kind of
Japanese
bugs me.
thing, right? Like,
Yeah,
like in Japanese media, you kind of just bring up drugs and like any like a Japanese audience is like, "Oh yeah, oh shit." Like really
drugs,
bad.
man.
Okay.
Oh damn, can't talk
Yeah.
about those. Yeah, and then of course the second thing, like, I said that the climax kind of relies on it. I don't know how much it really relies on it, but the other thing is of course the Yuri aspect of it, which is like there's lilies placed throughout the movie, for some reason or another. And of course, there's, a couple like, um, not suggestive, but there's a couple lines that are like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like when Azaka says like, "Let's stop playing with fire." Um, that's a classic. That's what they say. So yeah, I find that to be kind of dumb. Like I wouldn't go as far as to say that the narrative is like directly homophobic or anything. Like because
It's
obviously
just
like
kind of
there's no
cheesy.
particular comment. It's
It's like a
very cheesy,
very
and it's also like
shallow.
while it might not be like you know actually homophobic in terms of like oh like their relationship is like morally wrong or something. It is like a classic example of like the tragic lesbian villain or whatever, which is like just annoying and problematic in its own way. Um, and also, it's super heavy-handed. Like the fact that the fairy monster that's controlling her is like a literal lily flower is like just fuck you. Stop doing this. like it.
Yeah, it's just a giant lily corrupting her and, making her do lily things.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And the fact that Asuka ends it with a kick to something that could be a Georgia O'Keeffe painting. That's definitely not meaningful at all. Don't look any further into it. Yeah, I don't really like this movie.
Yeah. I remember it's interesting on the first watch through. I remember being like, "Hey, like, this was like semi-enjoyable tone-wise. Like this was one of the more enjoyable ones tone-wise." Um, and now I'm just like, "Yeah, it's empty and shallow and
Yeah,
pretty
and like
threadbare."
I would have appreciated a break that was mostly slice of life, that was like kind of low stakes and like was doing its own thing. And I don't mind that they tied it in a little bit with like the
Yeah,
memories and stuff, but
if that's what they were
it
going for,
doesn't
it's super
land.
half-assed. Like
Yeah,
they were
they
just
don't
like, "Oh,
because
let's go for it, but also can we still do the like,
yeah, rather than being like
intense
a
mage
nice
thing?
break with like a little bit of like tie-in, it
Like
like doesn't do
we
either
need the
very
crime
well.
investigation." Yeah.
Yeah, like it spends so much time like just kind of waffling in like an investigation that isn't an investigation. And I don't mind the
Well, I
like
would prefer.
implicit
Well,
like
I would
characterization
actually
that Kokuto
disagree
is
with
way
that and
worse at
say that it
investigating
doesn't
than her
spend
brother.
enough time waffling. It like gets to the point with the investigation where it should be waffling and being a slice of life. Like if they
Mm.
spent the whole movie like just like investigating and like running into nothing, and then like in the last like 15 minutes they figure everything out and resolve the climax, I would prefer that because you get more of the slice of life tone throughout the movie
That's
rather
fair
than
enough.
just like
Yeah.
these constant clues, like little bits of like,
Yeah, I mean,
oh, like they're in mass and like he says the words and then everything turns blue and then it turns not blue again. Oh, what's going on? It's like that. Just no. Like it was done fine, but it's just like the inclusion of that. Like it's just like, give me my slice of life.
yeah, I think regardless of our opinions on what specifically needs to change, I think we can agree that it's trying to do two things and it half-asses both of them instead of doing either well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the definition of half-assing.
Yeah. Well, it's whole assing, but it's like two halves. It's
Well,
not
yeah.
like two whole asses.
I
It's
mean,
not
yeah, a
one
lot
whole
of
ass.
yeah, a lot of
It's two
half-ass
half
stuff
asses,
is that.
which don't combine into one. You can't do normal addition on asses. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
The operation's not defined. All right. Well, anything else to say about this movie?
No, not really. Harry Potter, Mikia.
Oh yeah, he's
Um,
got his Gryffindor scarf. His glasses aren't round though.
shh, shh. They're round enough.
Hmm.
Question: do you know what was up with the roommate, whatever her name was, returning at the end
Seo?
and being like, "Yeah,
She's one of
Saya."
the main characters of Mirai Queen.
Okay, there you go. So,
Yeah.
okay, so cool. So it's just like Nasu like dropping hints and being like, "What?" Like you're not supposed to understand it the first time you watch
I
the first
guess.
time you watch it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Does the dog come
I mean,
back?
she's just supposed to be like a roommate. The dog
Oh,
is
okay.
like not really relevant.
Yeah. Because she's like, "Oh, like good
Oh wait,
work."
no,
And
actually,
it's
yeah,
like,
because
"Wait.
Mirai Queen takes place before this one. So yeah, the dog, I think she didn't have it yet.
Okay.
There you go. I mean, that's really the highlight of the movie is the Seo cameo.
I'll take your word for it."
Yeah. Anyway, with that high praise out of the way, signing off now. Bye.
Off.
Hey everybody, welcome back. What's up? I'm Kate. My pronouns are she/her.
I'm John. He, him.
This is a thing where we do radio. It's radio. That's what it is.
Don't touch that dial.
Yeah. Uh, so we just finished watching the seventh Kara no Kyoukai movie.
The
Sachi,
same day that we recorded,
yeah,
that we watched
Satsujin
and
go
recorded
Satsu.
about
Go.
the sixth movie.
It is go, right? Yeah. And this time we've held off on like talking about it in the credits, or at least I did.
Well,
So
yeah, I said one thing.
it was laborious, is my takeaway. Like five, I typically don't rewatch
Yeah.
this one. Um, I think after like the second rewatch, I decided it kind of wasn't for me, and this one, if anything, I've become even more certain of that. With five, I kind of decided that I liked it more than I had thought. But yeah, this movie it sags under the weight of its plot. Unlike the other movies, which are at least trying or at least pretending to be about something else while also having plot in the background, this movie is like 100% plot. It's like two in that regard. And it's not like, I guess it does like sort of pretend to have philosophy where it's like talking a lot about murder and mostly murder. I mean, it's
Murder versus slaughter.
yeah, like it's a little hard to
Satsujinki
tell.
versus Satsurinki or
Satsuriku. Yeah,
Satsuriku, yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, it mostly is on the level of like, I don't know, like some of it's wordplay, some of it is
A
like,
lot of it is just talking in circles, is how I felt.
yeah, and like it's not like, so I mean, maybe now we'll have the conversation of like what is and isn't philosophy, right? Like, you know, like when they talk about like murder and stuff, and they're like, a person can only kill a person once, like it doesn't, like it doesn't really. They're not really saying anything like meaningful or concrete, right? Like it's still just on the level of it being like a kind of like suggestive, like maybe there's somewhere you could go with that, but it's not itself like
Yeah,
a
it's
statement about
more of a
anything.
theme idea than a theme.
Yeah,
And
like
I think when a lot of people watch this movie and praise this movie, they take the kind of rambling, like going in circles about theme ideas as like definitive thematic exploration, which it isn't. Um,
yeah. and we can return back to discussing the themes. I just, immediately got tired of it in 10 seconds. But I think, like, the thing is, like,
Yeah.
it pains me to think that maybe I have to talk about, like, what this movie is trying to do, quote unquote, thematically. Um, but I'd much rather
Yeah.
just say that, like, hey, it's a really slow paced movie. It's like twice as long as it needs to be. It's really bogged down with its plot. It has a lot of weird shit going on in it. Like, the drug stuff is kind of weird and dumb. Like, the weird rapey
Only
scene where he
kind of.
drools all over her is, like, extremely dumb. Like, why is there so much liquid? Just stop. This is weird. If it's a horny thing, get
That's what
help.
happens. That's what happens when
If
you get
not,
high,
why is it in the movie? Yeah,
You
like,
just drool
there's
endlessly.
all sorts of shit that like makes me not like the movie already. So like it almost is a moot point that the quote unquote philosophy is also not really there.
Yeah, if you're listening to this after listening to the first two episodes of this series where we talk about, or the first three, I suppose, where we talk about the other movies, um, and you're noticing the marked difference in our tone, um, it's a little bit because we watched it late. Um,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
11:30
I'm a
here
little
on the West
tired. I
Coast.
mean, it's not past
But
my
it's
bedtime or
for me,
anything.
like for me, it's mostly, yeah, both of us usually go to bed later than this. For me anyways, it's mostly just like thinking about this movie and like trying to wrap my head around this movie is a chore. Um,
Well,
it's
it's
not
also a
really.
boring fucking movie, man.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Like,
it's a chore because it's boring. Like because you think
yeah,
about it, and you're like, this isn't interesting. Like, oh, you can only kill once. Okay, cool, whatever. You can affirm that, but like, it doesn't make me think that it's interesting. It doesn't make it
yeah,
any
and
more
it
interesting to
doesn't
like
really like
talk about it
touch on.
the same way like five different times. Like,
Yeah, well, because like as far as I can tell, like if you put it in like straightforward language in terms of like what are you actually saying, most of the movie just amounts to killing people's bad and it changes you and so you shouldn't do it, which is just a plot device. It's just a way of talking about like what the whole
and if
conflict is because
yeah, and if
obviously
that's
Shiki could kill Leo at any time, which is demonstrated later in the movie, which is like sure, the whole central conflict of the movie is whether like can bring herself to kill him. But the fact that they spend so much fucking time saying so little is
yeah,
just like ugh. And because of
yeah,
the
if
like
that's your main theme, you have a big problem.
yeah,
Like if
well
you
I mean
think that that's your main theme, you're in trouble.
yeah, like I don't mind it as the main conflict because it could be interesting,
Oh,
right? Like,
yeah.
series
I,
where it's just about a character coming to a decision, like, maybe foreshadowing, we'll talk about the series at some point, but like Madoka, for example, is a series that, it makes you think that it's about like doing things as a magical girl, but it's really just about the decision to become one. So I don't mind that the main conflict is not really about the process of killing this guy, but rather the decision, like coming to the conclusion that you have to, that it's necessary, right? And I think Madoka is
I
an
think
example of
that's
how
the
that kind of
important
deliberation can be made very interesting. But this movie is
yeah.
so fucking boring by comparison. Oh my god.
Well, and also Madoka actually manages to like explore themes
Yeah,
within
well, of
that. Like
course.
it's a good example of the distinction between plot and theme. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's
Because
laborious.
we
That's
could
really
go
the
through
best
each
word for it.
scene. We could go through each scene and be like,
Oh
this
God,
is
no.
this conversation and blah blah blah. But I honestly really do think it comes down to it. It's all kind of just like fancy ways of saying things that are roughly circling around the same conflict of like, whether it's okay for Shiki to kill this guy. So, and that's the thing, right? It's a movie that's just singularly concerned with advancing their relationship and tying up plot threads, which makes it really boring. There's very little tension, like weirdly, right? Because like it's not like they don't do a good job of making Leo like
Yeah.
scary, but like there's no, I don't know, like you're
Yeah,
never worried
I
about the
think that's what
direction the plot's
makes
gonna go in.
yeah.
Like
That's
they
what
don't.
makes like the horror scenes in the middle so jarring. Because it's like there's no tension here. Why are we doing this like
Yeah, when he's like
crazy high
slobbering all
suspense
over her
violence that
too.
we've never, well, that too,
Oh
but
yeah,
also like
I see.
when Mikia's like walking through the alleys and like like the people are just statues holding drugs, like,
Yeah.
and there's the crazy violins that they've never done the whole series, and now it's like this
Yeah, it's
crazy
like,
high
well,
suspense horror, and
they
it
do
just
use
doesn't
that kind
play
of music
because
when
there's no
they're
real
like finding
tension.
corpses, but yeah, I mean,
Well, okay, so
like literally, I had forgotten
in
what happened in the
two, they
movie.
mostly played it off silence, if what like from what I remember correctly, or music wise,
A
like
little bit.
there was the time that she found it under the train tracks, that like I mean, they didn't use music like this. It definitely wasn't to this extent.
Yeah, no,
Um,
absolutely. And I had forgotten what happened in this movie, like, scene by scene, right? Like I knew the plot, but I had forgotten like what was going to happen. And so when he was like walking through the dark back alleys and that music was playing, I was like, "Oh, he's going to discover a corpse." Like that's the only thing that this music would be appropriate for. And then
yeah,
it was just a
it's
drug
just
deal.
drugs. Yeah, I mean, and
Oh my
again,
god.
like it's Japan, um, but it's still frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, see, the thing is, like, I actually like wouldn't have minded if they had just kept it to the like, oh, I gave them my blood
Yeah,
because like I have like these weird ass powers and it has like my awakened origin in it, so it like drives people insane. I actually
I
wouldn't
mean
have minded that because like,
that's literally a boogie pop plot point. Like,
well, yeah, but I mean, like like that's at least it's like it's like magical, so we can suspend our disbelief. But when you like are just talking
yeah,
about like, yeah, this is like
well,
this is weed
meaning
and
that like, yeah,
and
I would be able to
LSD.
accept it because I accepted boogie pop. Yeah.
Yeah, like also the fact that it's like they hype up the fact that it's like weed and it's like, oh man, it's weed, and he's like, it's weed I got from Araya, it's special weed.
Yeah.
This weed is 10 times stronger than
It's
marijuana.
it's special weed, so it only needs like 10 hours of daylight cycle or like 12 hours of daylight cycle. We don't need to like keep it at specific temperatures or
12
anything. It's
hours,
special weed.
those are fucking rookie numbers. We have a roof over it, it's never lit. It only gets sunlight when the
Well,
sun is
no,
at the
'cause
right angle through the windows.
that yeah, through from the skylight,
Yeah,
because
it's
there
like
is a
3 hours
skylight.
at a time.
Um, yeah, that's yeah, maybe 8 or 10 is closer, but yeah. And then he was like, "I grew them carefully," and it's like, "Bitch, no, you didn't."
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that as much, but I
Yeah, I mean,
definitely agree
I
that
was just
it
it
sort
just
of
made me
cheapens
laugh.
the
It just
yeah,
made me laugh.
because it's a movie that takes itself very seriously in other aspects. So it's like, all
Yeah.
right, well, this
In the
is
same,
dumb.
yeah, like in the same way that like when Toko is just like swirling her coffee around and around for like 15 seconds, and like when Mikia is crawling um to Shiki's body at the very end, and like he's not crawling with his legs, or I mean, like like the animation, his legs are just moving, like dragging at a constant speed across the floor. Like those types of things just make me laugh because the movie is like so dedicated to like the atmosphere and the tone, and then like those kinds of things happen, like the drooling.
Yeah, yeah. I
Like
mean, like,
I was caught between being really creeped out and like just laughing and finding it humorous, and so like it was just kind of a weird
yeah, I had the same
in between.
reaction.
But
I was a lot more physical about it than you. I think you probably noticed.
I
Um,
I don't know if I did, but
well, I
I
couldn't
probably
sit still.
heard.
I had my head in my hands. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah,
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 like
I heard you moving
I
around.
was while that scene was happening, I was just thinking to myself, like, why is there so much liquid? Where is it coming from? Does he have a bladder in his mouth?
Yeah.
Like,
It,
did he put a
he
water balloon
he's
in his mouth and hide it there
all of
beforehand?
all of his memories of when he was born as a beast in his previous lives,
Yeah,
he's just like a lion. He just salivates endlessly.
yeah. I mean, that's what
That's how
predators are
predators
like.
are. Yeah.
They have really thick and viscous saliva, and they make tons of it really fast.
Yep. And it never stops.
Yeah, and they have really long, weird tongues,
Like they don't need to
and
hydrate themselves.
it's really
They can
shiny.
just like spew out like buckets worth of saliva at a time.
Yeah. Also, if you take whatever drugs that he gave to Shiki, I don't know. I don't think it was the drugs that he sells. It was a different kind. But it'll raise your body temperature so much that you'll be able to boil off water that's on you. And also, if you get covered in a thick viscous fluid of any kind and then you boil it off, it actually won't leave any residue behind. So you don't have to worry about
Yeah.
that. Like, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. I'm not saying that her clothes should have been crusty. I'm saying that they shouldn't have fucking bothered putting it on in the first place. Just get rid of the
Yeah.
whole. Just why? Why do you need to have him drool all over her and then only to have her like randomly get boiling
Nasu
hot and
bingo,
dry
baby.
herself off? What is happening, dude?
I mean, I told you during the movie we needed to check off the last box on the Nasu bingo.
Yeah, you're
So
right. You're right. We'll see. Like now that we've checked all the boxes on Nasu Bingo, we can actually make a movie like free of the restrictions of the bingo. That's what this was for. Actually, they were like, look, I mean, either we can make two movies that both have some weirdness in them, or we can put it all in one movie, and then Mirai Fukuin will be great. And we know what choice they made.
what's the 30-minute like fake epilogue like Voichki, just the conversation that you were talking about? What's it called? Do you remember?
Shusho.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
Kara no
Yeah, yeah,
Kyokai 8 Shusho. Yeah.
yeah. Shusho. Yeah, that's that basically.
Yeah, like honestly, given that it's a long movie, like there would be plenty to talk about if we wanted to, but I honestly think out of all of the movies in the series, it's like the most straightforwardly bad. I don't know that it's the worst, but it's like the
Yeah,
least interesting.
I would say it's the worst, mostly because time means a lot to me.
That's true. Yeah, I because like I
Like,
think it's competing. It's
if
in
it's
a
the
certain
same,
sense, it's
if it's
competing
like
with
the
the second
same,
and the sixth for being worst, and
yeah, if
like
it's the
those
same
movies were
type
at least
of
shorter.
writing, yeah, if it's the same type of writing, like, but it's, an hour long, then it's just it's exponentially more tolerable. But like, uh,
Yeah.
they just cram in so much. Like the drug shit is just so pointless. Like it's as if he like
No, but
Nasu like finished six and
Kokuto
then
has
like
got to be
steps
a freaking
back.
detective, man. He's
Yeah,
got to
that's
do
true.
detective work.
He's gotta have
He's got
boots
to
on the
find a
ground,
random,
like putting
fake,
himself at
faceless,
risk.
nameless drug dealer that will never appear again in the series, and but that is nonetheless like weirdly like
Yeah.
specific.
Also, like, yeah, like I don't
Like, who
like,
was she? What's the point of that?
and also like every single person knows like he's like the mastermind, like head of the pyramid,
Yeah,
whatever.
apparently he's really
And
well
every
known,
single person
and
know,
none
well,
of
not
the
even well
cops don't
known.
know shit about
Everyone
it.
knows his name. Yeah, like
Yeah,
like it's one thing if it's like yeah, like my guy like Lionhead or whatever. It's
yeah.
like
Or my
he's
my
the head
guy's
guy,
guy.
and then like Mikia's like oh shit like Leo, maybe it's him, you know.
Yeah, but she just straight up tells him
But she's just
his
like
name.
yeah, like you don't know his
She
name.
has him
Everyone
Leo.
knows his name.
And the movie's like,
Yeah,
oh well, we got to keep the tension up. We can't say who it is. It's like, all
yeah,
right, we'll
exactly.
find
It's
out in
like
10 minutes anyway.
it's like the after credits of the sixth one. It's just like, no, you can't, you know who it is, but we can't tell you.
Yeah,
Um, there's something else about the sixth one that I was gonna say. Um,
Nasu just took a step back and was like, we need more drugs.
thank you for remembering exactly where I left off.
It's a
Yeah,
special skill.
yeah, Nasu finished the sixth one and was like, you know what? I didn't like go in depth enough about heroin. Like this is kind of a shallow depiction of drug users. Like I could do better.
Yeah, yeah. Look,
Let's
I mean, we
have
did
the
heroin. Now
have
we
them
gotta
let's
have
have them make
LSD and
a
weed.
yeah, he's it's a cocktail of LSD and weed. Like the cocktail being that you sell them separately.
Yeah.
Like what?
So like, is it just me, or is that like, does that combination doesn't even not even make sense?
I mean, like there are people who like smoke
Like obviously there's people who
while
combine anything, right?
tripping, but I mean, yeah, like
Like
so,
any
but like
given
it's not,
combination, there's people doing it, but
yeah,
like,
but it, like there are things like, like um, acid and Molly is like candy flipping, right? Like it has a name, right? I've never heard of anybody be like, oh, like, like talk about like smoking weed while on acid as a specific name. It's just like if you're a stoner and you're tripping, it's something that you might do. Like
yeah,
like it's kind of normal. Like like honestly, people mix acid and weed pretty frequently. Like
yeah.
and they're
It's
just
it's
like, yeah,
weird though
it's just
that
a
he's
cocktail
selling
of
both. I don't understand why he had to. Like I think when they call it
yeah.
a cocktail, I think, and this is me being charitable, right? I think the cocktail, it's like the LSD is a cocktail, right? Because like it's often the
That's
case. At least this
that's
is my
yeah,
understanding. At least
I
it's
was
often the
going
case that
back and
LSD
forth.
is adulterated with things, or it's a different it's a different psychedelic sold as LSD. So I, you know, I can see how if they call it a cocktail, maybe they're not saying that it's an LSD marijuana cocktail. It's just it's not pure LSD. But like the psychedelic component is the quote unquote
Yeah.
cocktail,
I mean,
and then the weed
regardless,
is
like
just a
it
separate
wasn't
thing.
clear at all. Like it's
Yeah,
obvious that he has no idea what he's talking about,
yeah. I mean, in any case, there's just I don't see the point.
which
Like
is like
I don't see
again,
what
it's
it adds.
Japan,
Yeah,
but there's no reason to add it. Yeah.
yeah. It's taboo.
Like
It
there's
was
or
this
there's
was all actually written by
you're
Asuka,
right.
and she's like, look, it's
You're right.
taboo. I'm
You're
drawn
right.
to it. I gotta write about drugs.
I don't know anything about it, but
Yeah.
she has to enforce the taboo while writing about it. She's like, "Yo, if you fucking do weed and acid together, you're gonna start eating people, bro."
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
That's what drugs do to you.
Do we want to talk about the fight animation?
Not really. I mean, it's unremarkable.
Yeah, it's very unremarkable. That's what I was
Like,
gonna say.
well,
Like you would think
the
for the
animation
last
is like
movie,
solid, but the choreography is
well,
unremarkable, and like
yeah,
the shot
exactly,
composition and
exactly.
direction overall. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same shit. It's like, it gets really old by this. I mean, I think it's already gotten old by 5 and 6, and it's really old by this movie where it's just like a wide shot that shakes a couple times and maybe moves back and forth with
Yeah.
just the characters like fighting from on a it's like it looks like a fighting game basically, like it's just
Yeah.
two characters on a 2D and the camera sometimes moves left to right and they just fight, and like when it's choreographed well it's bearable, but like there's a reason that like most action movies and like most anime movies like you know don't do that for every single fight. Like is because it's if you do it for every single fight it's usually boring. Like you have to come up with crazy good choreography in order to make it interesting if you do it like 5 times in the course of 3 hours,
Yeah.
or like 6 or 7 times in the course of 3 hours.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think.
I
Like in the time since we watched the credits, and you were I don't know if you were what you were doing in the kitchen, but I like went back
oh
through
I
the movie again, just like really holding right arrow, and like yeah, I mean like there's no scene in this movie that I like really like that I'm like, oh yeah, this is what like keeps my interest. This is what
agreed.
makes me want to forgive the rest of it. Like yeah, I don't know. The ending also feel like not the ending, sorry, the opening sequence. Like in the other movies,
Oh,
they at least like, and I think that this circles back to the plot versus theme, right? Like the other movies, they at least have a pretension of having some sort of theme, right? They have an opening sequence that has like either some kind of visual metaphor or like a significant scene or some kind of like you know whatever, right? Suggestive imagery. Whereas this movie opens just on like shots of Shirazumi Leo's apartment. Like yeah, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I didn't
like
even think about that.
is there something meaningful to like the negative of film of Shiki and like the like LSD squares?
It looks cool. Film negatives,
Yeah,
you know?
like I
It's
mean
just
it's like I
it's
don't
like the dark side of the it's like when the strong light casts a shadow.
you're right, yeah.
Yeah, this movie had only two, I think, um generic Toko monologues.
Yeah, believe it or not, maybe those were actually what was holding the movies
Only
together. We
only
just
one per
never
hour,
realized
yeah.
until we lost them. You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah. Um
Yeah, Toko is just interestingly kind of not present at all, and Toko also kind of doesn't get her own like her conclusion is very off screen, right? Because like the implication is that she packs up and leaves town, but
yeah, I would have liked, like Oitoishi type ending for her, like post credits.
You're gonna
I
have to
don't know.
explain that reference.
Oh, in Bake, um, when Meme leaves and then they do like the song montage type sequence and they're like, he was
Right.
actually a good
Yeah.
guy.
Sure.
Um, that type of thing where it's just like them like being like, oh,
Just
she's
some
gone, and
acknowledgement.
then they like just maybe like a little brief reminiscence or something like that.
Mm.
But it's really nothing. It's really she's just like, oh, I guess it's time to move on, and then it goes to do the movie's climax, and then it ends.
Yeah, it spends like
Like for
so
somebody
much
who is as core to
time.
the plot as Toko is, it feels a little, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean,
Like I
like,
get that it's
so
like, oh, she's mysterious. She just comes and goes, but
yeah, like I on a plot level, I like the idea of her just disappearing and not being forgotten necessarily, but of them just moving on. But
well, yeah,
I if that's the case, then like you can drive that home as well without having her disappear
yeah,
literally from the movie. Like,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's not my biggest peeve, but I agree that it's a bit strange.
The voice actors just like died in the middle of, and they were just like, yeah, we're
Yeah,
done.
can't do it.
We can't do anymore.
Hmm.
Rip Toki.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a laborious movie. It's pain. It's a chore. It's very boring. It's very long. Despite having
The
quite a lot
movie
of
the
action,
movie
it has
doesn't
almost no
go.
tension. What do you mean? Sorry. Am I not understanding a reference or is that just
It's Satsuji and Kosatsu go, and it never goes. It just spends the whole time
Yeah, more like Satsujin
rolling
Kousatsu
around.
stay.
Oh, yeah. Um,
Well, I
I'm
think
trying to
that's
think
enough from
of.
us.
Yeah, I
Unless
don't
you
think
have more
there's
to
really
say.
anything else for me to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Don't do
If you've
drugs,
liked us
kids.
being critical of things and hating things, then maybe you won't like what's coming next. Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe John will hate it. But I really like Mirai Fukuin, so that episode will be a bit more, upbeat, positive. Or not. I mean, who knows?